Oh, too bright.
And now I have to wait until I get the okie dokie. Okie dokie. Do I get the okie dokie? Are we live? Are we live? I think that we might be.
We are.
We're live.
I can hear us.
You know. So let's pause those things that are playing so they don't get annoying. And let's start a show in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science episode. Let me start that over because obviously I cannot speak this evening once again. 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 698, recorded on Wednesday, December 5th, 2018. How do people make babies? Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we are going to fill your heads with a uterus, not a dolphin, and a trace. But first,
disclaimer. Humans, they're pretty much everywhere. The following program is geared towards humans. Humans make up most of the listening audience. The stories are mostly retold by humans based on scientific work done by other humans. There are humans helping record, edit, and rebroadcast the show. There are humans who support the financial needs of the show. There are even humans who visit the show from time to time. But oddly, the actual content of the show is rarely directly about humans. It's one of the wonderful things about science. Unlike most anything else we humans talk about, science allows us to focus our minds on things not human. And as it turns out, there's a lot more going on in the universe than just us. And we're going to talk about it here on This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I wanna learn everything. I wanna fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I wanna know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki.
and a good science to you too, Justin and Trace, because Blair is not here this evening. Good science to everyone out there. Welcome to this week's episode of This Week in Science. We are back again to fill your heads with all the science goodness that we found to talk about. And like I said, we're missing a Blair, and we hope that she's having a fabulous vacation. But we've gained a Trace. Hi, Trace.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
That's me.
Welcome to the show. And a good word of warning to any co-host who decides they have better things to do than participate in their entourage show. You can be replaced. It's just
Anyway, Trace is a science reporting nerd just like we are. And you might know him from places online like Seeker and D News, Revision 3. And we are excited to have his brand of science reportage here with us this evening. So, Trace, this is exciting. You decided to join us. We've talked about this. We talked about it once, ages and ages ago.
So long ago.
So long ago, and we finally made it happen.
I'm so happy. Yeah. I'm finally on the show. It's weird to be on this side of the headphones. I mean, the headphones are the same, but I don't know. It's weird.
But it's different. It is. And you're not dead, which is good. You're healing up from a cold. So
from like the worst flu of my life. No. I don't know what happened. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything. I was just sweaty all the time. It was really hot.
Really uncomfortable and hot. And I'm glad you healed up, and the timing worked out perfectly for a show. And hopefully no sweatiness during the program. But
well, luckily it's audio mostly. So
that's right. We'll keep moving on. All right, everybody. On this week's show, I've got so much science news. We all brought a bunch of stuff. I brought stories about, well, a CRISPR update and some placentas in a dish. Also, some other stuff. Justin, what do you have?
Oh my gosh. I've got some ancient mystery hominins that were somewhat discovered. 229 new species of creatures that are now on the planet, as well as if you ever want to see Greenland, maybe do it pretty soon. That might be one of the more pressing destinations.
If you want to see Greenland while it's still not really green. Is that
Now's the time.
If you want to see it at all. Oh, and a warm-blooded marine reptile. It's going to be an interesting one.
Interesting show. All right. And Trace, did you bring us some science also?
I brought some science. A deceased woman's uterus birthed a baby.
That's true.
Yeah. It's going to be cool. And then also general relativity has been confirmed yet again, but I think this is a pretty cool way that we confirmed it because it started with a horrible, horrible mistake.
That's the best science.
Right?
I love that. I can't wait
excited
to hear that story. I'm so excited. All right, everyone, as we jump into the show, I want to remind you that you can subscribe to the TWIS podcast on iTunes, in the Google Play podcast portal, where else? In Spotify, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, and soon we're going to be in the Pandora podcast directory when they release that.
That'll be awesome.
Yeah. You can also find us on YouTube and Facebook. All these places, you can look for us by searching for This Week in Science. You can also go directly to twis.org. At twis.org, you can find information about our 2019 TWIS Blair's Animal Corner calendar, which she did all the art for. She hand drew everything. She's the artiste in the house, but not in the house tonight, obviously. But now it's time for CRISPR babies update. So we talked last week about CRISPR and the gene editing of human embryos that were allowed to go to full term pregnancy, birthed healthy twin girls. The gene edited was a CCR5 gene. There is a naturally mutated version of this gene that seems to confer HIV resistance on people. And apparently, the researcher decided that he was going to do research in the goal of helping people become resistant to HIV in an area in which HIV is a growing problem. However, there's other treatments that are cheaper, better, possibly, than going into this gene editing role. And hey, 2 new things came up in the last week that I thought might tell us something about this story. First thing, turns out from researchers, particularly a paper that came out in 2016 reporting on CCR5's role in learning and memory. There are other papers that suggest that this CCR5 gene is not just an entry point for HIV into the immune system. It also communicates with neurons involved with learning and memory, and is involved in the process of neurodegeneration and dementia that can occur in HIV patients. So blocking or having a mutated version of CCR5 was shown to improve memory in mice as well as humans. And so the doctor, he said, no, I'm just trying to help people with HIV. Could it be there's a secondary intent by choosing this gene?
Well, this is going to be really frustrating if so, because then there's going to be a pair of twins who are winning every spelling bee, and they keep going. Like there's never a word that comes across to these two that they can't spell because their memories are so good. And so the spelling bee goes like late into the night on into the next day.
They just know
It's
everything.
become an endurance sport.
Think of the suffering.
Yeah.
That's going to cause for everyone. My goodness.
Super suffering. Everyone having to listen to all those words. No, I like words and spelling. But the question is, really? This is one of those moments. Second point on this, the update here. The researcher, Dr. He, has gone missing.
Yay!
Wait, what do you mean by missing? What are we talking missing?
Well,
Fled to the
last-
hill until
No,
this kind of
no,
dies
we
down,
don't-
or has been
nobody's-
abducted?
Nobody is saying he
Gotta say
was under investigation by his institution and by the Chinese government, and suddenly he's gone. Not
yeah.
replying to emails. Nobody can find him, and the government's not saying anything.
No. Oh, that's terrible.
Yikes!
So what is this investigation that's happening? So not only is this a fascinating ethical conundrum that we have found ourselves in suddenly, but it's also turning into kind of a fun mystery story.
Okay, so fun topic. What's the bigger ethical conundrum? Gene editing when the world maybe doesn't want you to, or disappearing a scientist because you disagree with their research?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I still think gene editing.
I don't.
I mean, it's rare that I come down on the same side as potentially the Chinese government, but in these areas.
So as a human, as a human, I always freak out when bad things happen to humans. And therefore, if anything ill has befallen this scientist, I feel doubly bad for him, because I also have a soft spot for scientists.
doubly bad for him. And then, what if ill things befall these gene-edited babies?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, they didn't get to choose whether or not they were going to be gene edited.
Did you? But I mean, did you get nobody chooses their parents?
That's true, but my parents are
the genes they gave you. You had no say in it. This is just how this works.
Yeah, but my parents were still just Tom and Kathy, not Tom, Kathy, and the government of China.
That's right. Just two people as opposed to whole society, right? So let's move on from the CRISPR update. This is an ongoing story that we will continue to highlight and to bring into our conversations. So Trace, you brought the uterus story. I brought the uterus story also, but I would love you to tell me a story about a deceased woman's uterus.
Oh man, that's just something I've always wanted somebody to tell me, to ask me to do.
Right?
Thanks, Kiki.
You're welcome.
So, excuse me. So this was a story that on the surface seems it's on the surface seems very exciting just on its surface, right? It's a previously infertile woman who has been given a uterus from an organ donation, and then from that was able to give birth. That in itself, super exciting.
Yeah.
However, it has these little added bonuses of fun and interest, right? The uterus came from a woman who had a stroke, and so she was deceased when she donated the organ. It wasn't like, I'm done with my uterus, here, you may have it and use it to birth many children. It was, she was an organ donor, and so it was one of the organs harvested after she'd had her stroke, similar to kidneys and other organs that any organ donor is going to give, which is one, just opens up a whole new world of potential donors for this organ. But I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit, because it's also the first time it has ever been done, with a person who was born infertile with this specific syndrome called MRKH syndrome, which is a string of 4 different names that I don't remember off the top of my head. I didn't write them down. Right. But the MRKH syndrome essentially it's an affliction that the embryo gets, and it doesn't form one of the ducts that goes on to form the birth canal. So it's a genetic condition that happens to many, many people, and they don't end up forming the uterus. What they do end up forming is their ovaries and much of the rest of their body completely normally. So she's been infertile her whole life. But a deceased donor's uterus was transplanted into her, and even though she never had a birth canal, but she did have ovaries, she was able to then undergo IVF about 7 months after the transplant surgery, once they deemed everything was safe. And then she was basically birthing a baby that was one of her own eggs, which is just incredible.
Fantastic story, yeah.
Right? And it just, one human gestation period later, she had a 6-pound baby via C-section. So awesome. And the first time a deceased donor uterus has produced a successful birth in Latin America, and the first time ever worldwide a person with MRKH syndrome has used a donated uterus to give birth. Super exciting.
Yeah, it's a fantastic story. Yeah, because this, like, really, this is just opening up the pick and pull aspect of a human body once we're done with it. The idea that somebody else could prolong their life or bring new life onto the planet. And what a good argument also for gene editing. It would be if we could foretell that this was going to be a problem and prevent it. But yeah, what a fantastic story.
Yeah, I looked up a little bit of stats too. The CDC says in the U.S. alone, over 7 million women have used infertility services. So this could potentially be one of the ways to make a little over 7 million women in the U.S. find a way to give birth on their own with their own body and with the help of, you could say, another woman, which is super interesting.
Yeah, but let's just talk about what you're doing when you're undergoing this process. So the benefit here is you're not taking a working, functioning uterus from a living person, causing somebody else to go under an invasive procedure that could have complications. A single person would in this situation choosing to undergo this themselves and it's not going to be detrimental to anybody else. The person donating is already deceased and has offered everything they have to whoever can take it. And so this is a good situation because it's minimizing what's going to affect other people, but you're still having an invasive procedure that could have massive complications for yourself. You're going to then have immunosuppressive drugs after the procedure to maintain the uterus during the healing process. And then you're going to be taking those immunosuppressive drugs during the pregnancy, which to me seems like a really interesting interesting point about what would be circulating in your body during that period of gestation for a child. It's probably fine. There have been other people who have had these transplants in pregnancy.
Of pretty much any kind.
Yeah.
Still have to take that.
And 6 pounds is exceedingly light, is it not? This is this is a premature and by C-section. So, but here's the thing that I would throw out there as the caveat of before you even dare to ask your own ethical question on any of this, this is this family's chance at a next generation, and any chance if you are, against these odds, regardless. If you're the last people on the planet, we'd all say, yes, you must. You have no choice but to. But even if you're not, you're the last people of your people from your perspective.
Right.
So there, nobody is ever allowed to cast any shadow of ethics at all anywhere in these people's direction.
I will cast some. I mean, I'm not judging. I'm going to bring up points that will probably be used to debate this in the future, if at all. It's and not only suggesting the dangers to the woman for the surgery. There's also the question of passing those genetic anomalies on to the offspring without gene edit. If we don't use gene editing,
I like that.
Right? You're potentially passing these problems on to the next generation to be, for
just
technology.
have to do this again.
Have to do it again and again, right?
So the way to avoid that is to allow gene editing. Exactly.
There we go.
The solution, not the problem.
And then finally is cost. And so this is probably not going to be an inexpensive procedure. How often is this going to be covered by insurance? Is this something that most everybody will have available to them who wants to have that child that will be the last of their line? Or is this only going to be something that will be available to those with the funds to afford it, as most things in healthcare are these days?
And in everything else too. But I mean,
And
that's not just
I'm just putting the points out.
There's a whole lot of things that I would like to have that are nicer that have nothing to do with healthcare, and I don't have them. But that's just a different story. But yeah, so okay. So then the ethics too is like, okay, what if the child didn't make it, or doesn't make it far, or if the mother had died? Again, I would take this down to which I always never liked the idea of we were making an argument for a woman's right to have the choice about her body. I don't think that's a relevant argument. I think the relevant argument is nobody else should have the decision making for somebody else's body, regardless. Like that's like, so these decisions aren't ours to make or to even decide upon in any way. This is not the sort of thing that any human being has the right to decide for another human being. And we should just leave it there in that field and hope nobody walks
Let the doctors do the science.
Yeah.
I did think of, it's funny because it almost reminds me of the gene editing story, in that there's a psychological connection almost, or like a psychological issue here too. Organ transplantation in general has a lot of psychological not problems, but like trip ups that can happen. People feeling like this part is not part of me, or this part is someone else's body part, right? And that can cause people to feel unfamiliar with their own body and cause body like dysmorphic type issues, as well as anxieties just about their own internal and external parts. And with something like a uterus, even the doctor, in one of the write-ups on it in the New York Times, they were talking about a quote from the doctor who, and I'm not going to say the quote exactly, but essentially saying, we don't actually know how people are going to feel about the uterus as a transplanted organ. Like, we're pretty familiar with how people feel about getting a kidney, but a uterus, do they think of it like a kidney or a hand? And I thought, that's interesting. Like, the kidney just does its job, right?
Let me just tell you about my uterus.
Yeah. This is where I was hoping to get with this show.
That's right. No, it is something that as a woman you grow up with. It is a part of you. It's a part of affecting you on a monthly basis. It is, it is a hormone secreting organ. It's something that sometimes you can tell it's it's there, and it is like a hand. It's not like a kidney that just sits in your back. It is as a woman, it is a part of you.
Okay, but
absolutely.
Here's my question. Are they leaving it in?
I don't know.
No, so are
they taking it as like, oh, it's done, and
that's what they did with this study. So for this study, it's a study, and so they put the uterus in, and she had the baby, and then in the C-section they took the uterus out so that
that makes way more sense, because you don't need it, and it's to get off the immunosuppressives and on with it. Okay,
interesting.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
On top of that, I started thinking, like, the uterus's donor was a mother of 3, they said in the write-up as well. So that uterus carried 3 other babies.
What does that mean?
Right. So even though there's no genetic connection between the 4th baby coming out of that uterus, would they feel some kind of kinship if they know? I went and looked up some studies about people who had come out of surrogates, because that's kind of the closest thing we've studied more heavily. And most people, they actually did a study in the UK, and they found people who were born of surrogacy completely identified with the parents that they grew up with in terms of their happiness levels, for the most part. I mean, within common, like normal terms. But they said that they didn't feel like, oh, I was born from a surrogate, therefore you're not my parents. It was more like, especially if they were more open with the kid, which I thought was really interesting. So I imagine it would be something like that. But the best part is we don't really know. And so this is all new science now. So we get to do all these psychological studies and understand the psychosocial interactions and make sure that the family is doing well. It's going to be really cool to see, kind of like the first test tube babies. They didn't know if they were going to get all weird because they were grown in a different way. And it's just like, this is kind of the same. Really neat.
And it is just the beginning, and we will see where the science takes us and how successful it is.
Yeah.
As a therapy. Yeah. In other news related to reproduction, researchers have developed placentas in a dish, which I thought fit right in with this. So we've got gene editing of babies, and we've got transplanting uteruses for mothers to have babies. But what about the placenta? The placenta is so integral to the baby's health and the ability of a pregnancy to go full term. And the placenta is instigated by the fetus, right? So the placenta is this organ that mixes the blood supply between the mother and the child. However, it's started by the child. So we're getting all the way to the level of the child. Researchers...
And it's a virus, like DNA.
It's like a
at the
virus,
core.
right?
Like, this is also the other thing.
It's a little parasitic.
That's right.
Just a little, but like a friendly parasite.
An interesting point about immunosuppressed organ transplant patient, with the uterus to have a baby. The immunosuppression does it help the placenta in the uterine transplantation? It's a big question. Here, researchers, though, they're in England, they obtained first trimester placentas from women who had normal pregnancies but decided to abort their pregnancies. They took that placental tissue and grew the cells in Petri dishes, just put them in the lab to see if they could grow them. And within a week, they were able to get them to grow into organoids, which means they're multicellular, multi-layered little balls of cells that are a version of the real thing. And scientists are using organoids in all sorts of instances right now to be able to figure out how genes and disease affect the development of various organ systems around the body, but no one had been able to do this with placentas yet. And so researchers now have these placental organoids in a dish, which they are hoping they'll be able to develop out into a platform for looking into things like preeclampsia, fetal growth restrictions, stillbirths, miscarriages that occur based on problems of development of the placenta. So it's exciting.
Nice new tool.
Yeah.
Placentas are so neat.
Yeah.
They're like ugly octopuses, though.
I mean, I've never seen one in real life, only in pictures and videos.
Oh, no, they're really cute. They are really cute.
They're really, like, they grow on you.
They grow in you if you're a woman.
I guess that's true, yeah.
Yes.
It's sort of like if you've ever seen the movie Blob.
Oh.
It's sort of like how the Blob started, like baby Blob.
That's kind of cute. Baby Blob.
It is.
Little baby blob. Yeah. So anyway, these placentas, they're not only multicellular, they are excreting all of the chemical factors and hormones and all the things. They're acting like little mini placentas in the dish. So that's exciting for scientists.
But would a famous pop star eat them?
That's the question of the evening. There we go.
A famous television family, perhaps.
I don't.
So I have done that.
You have?
I have, yeah. In a not like sushi form. It was like a cooked and dried and in a pill, like kind of thing. But yeah, that was before though I had learned how cannibalistic it was in terms, like this was actually eating DNA of the child, like that creates it. Like I was like, oh, that's weird. Now, I mean, not that it wasn't weird to begin with, but it got weirder.
You'd be like,
after.
Huh? It's not so much that eating the placenta was weird. That's fine.
No. That's I've been in the neighborhood. Okay, that wasn't weird. Okay, it was more.
It was the DNA in the placenta. That was the weird.
Actually, I just devoured my child into some sort of weird Grecian mythology sort of thing that could take. That was very odd. Yeah.
The self-cannibalism, that could, maybe affect you a little bit. But before we get into that subject too deeply, let's change it and talk about something else. Justin, what'd you bring?
Oh, yeah, I should bring a story to change the venue of my conversation to something completely different. Beginning more than actually 1.5 million years ago, early humans made stone hand axes. This was like pretty much our Gerber tool for everything. We had any sort of thing that needed to be done. We had some kind of a stone axe that we would apply to it. And I can't pronounce it quite, but it's, I think, Acheulean is the name of this type of tool. And it's actually the longest lasting tool making tradition in the history of planet Earth, is this very particular style of stone axe. So new research led by Max Planck Institute for Science of Human History and the Saudi Commission for Tourism and National Heritage has discovered that this particular tool was in the Arabian Peninsula dating to less than 190,000 years ago. So 1.5 million years ago is like or more around there. This is the oldest one of these we found. The most recent one we now have discovered is 190,000 years, which my math isn't the best, but that's like 1.3 million years of using the same tool for everything. It's particularly interesting because this kind of makes it the end of that tool, that specific type of hand axe, because that's the most recent one that we can find going back. And also interesting, it kind of fits nicely to when modern humans began showing up and dispersing through that region. So while they sort of refer to this as early human tool use, it's most likely that this was a tool that was used for that large span of time by some sort of evolutionary cousin to the modern human. And our arrival seems to end its existence, right? So there may be now, they don't know, because they found lots of these tools. They haven't found any hominin bones to go with them that indicate that this was a different hominin from modern humans. This is a mystery hominin now. And it could be some sort of monkey cat that was fashioning these tools, but that's much less likely. Yeah, so they found over 500 stone tools in this one site. Hand axes, other artifacts is that they call cleavers. One of the stone flakes that was used to make the hand axes was in like mint condition. Like they had been making axes on this site. They weren't carried there. They were made in this site. So quotey voice for Dr. Eleanor Skerry of the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History. It's not surprising that early humans came here to make stone tools. The spot was both a source of raw material as well as a prime location to survey a landscape that back then sat between two major river systems. It was a pretty tough spot. There was wet seasons and then really dry seasons. It would kind of go to a greening and then a very arid time. So whatever hominins were living there were really able to survive in a pretty diverse ecology. And they sort of point out in this study too that while the tools were considered primitive by most other tool forms that have come after, the people who used them really survived much longer than modern humans have been on the planet through a very sort of diverse environment successfully. So,
and then the humans came,
and then right after the humans show up, party's over with. Like, how do we keep doing this?
We're just
over and over again.
Everywhere humans show up.
The party's over as soon as we show up. That's how it works.
It's terrible.
Why do you think no aliens have come down for all of these parties we have? We have a party every year. Happy New Year. Please, everyone, come on.
Yeah, they've seen our history. They've watched all of human history,
no.
and you go, not those ones.
You guys, you don't know how to party well. You hurt people, hurt
Yeah.
others. Nope. But seriously, so these hand axes have been called early human tools, and they're not human.
They're not. Well, I mean,
Hominid.
so there's sort of this gray area between what's an early human, and it's partly because we, for the longest time, thought there was a linear transition of the first upright ape into the modern man, and it turns out there's a braided stream of experimental hominins that went on for a very long time. So early human is sort of a carryover from that linear progression. But yes, essentially the tools were assumed to be human for a very long time, and now it kind of looks like, no, not so much. Actually, there might be evidence that says that humans ended the use of these tools by the people who used them. Whatever we do, that whether it's interbreeding or warfare, and there's conversations in both directions, we're really good at it. I think I particularly like the idea that we're just the most attractive hominins that have ever been, and we interbreed and breed out the other species.
That could be it.
So there's been a lot of other humans that look like humans. Here's a question: if it looks like a dolphin, walks like a dolphin, which would be weird, and it might even talk like a dolphin, we have no idea. It turns out, still not be a dolphin. There is an ancient extinct marine reptile that really does look like a dolphin. This is according to an international team of researchers that include scientists from North Carolina University and Sweden's Lund University. That it's a molecular and microstructural analysis of a 180 million year old Ichthyosaur from the Jurassic. And it turns out that these marine reptiles are most likely warm-blooded, had insulating blubber, had no scales, gave live birth, and used two-toned dark light coloration as camouflage from predators, pretty much exactly as do modern dolphins. So this is like a really big example of convergent evolution then, because if you looked at the Ichthyosaur and said, gosh, it looks like has all these features in common with, this is the ancestor of the modern dolphin. But apparently they are not related, and these were the completely divergent path for the dolphin to come into existence.
There's a lot of the traits, however, that belong to dolphins, but also sharks. There's that dark and light coloring on the top or the bottom because they're predators, and so there's certain ways that they look better seen from below in the ocean.
No, it's camouflage. You look up with the brighter above, and then if you're looking down and they're darker with the darker, yes.
Right, and so that coloring, that makes sense as a very good tactic that would be successful. But the interesting difference here is really the warm-blooded, what you would expect to be cold-blooded. Like this, what? Yeah,
so weird.
Yeah, I
love these kind of discoveries. It's just so fun to like you said about convergent evolution. It's just blows my mind every time. We got so many more designs. Why we got to copy our own?
Because they're the best ones.
Yes, because they're so exciting.
But I love sort of this way that they were able to do this. So they've got this specimen. This was they found this in the Holzmaden quarry in Germany, which apparently has given up a lot of really nice, fully intact fossils. And it was so well preserved, they say they could actually observe cellular layers within the skin. I mean, this is an unimaginable type of so they identified microstructures that held pigment organelles, which is how they could tell that there was the skin differences. They found traces of an internal organ that they believed to be the liver. and they did this. Where is the part where they explain what they did with the sciencey stuff? They did sciencey stuff. Where they
love sciencey stuff.
They did some science. I'm just gonna put it like this. They did some science. Okay. So this is Schweitzer. She was from Mary Schweitzer, North Carolina State researchers, and her research assistant Wenxia Zheng extracted soft tissues from the samples and performed multiple high-resolution immunohistochemical analyses. This is Quotey Voice. We developed a panel of antibodies that we applied to all of the samples and saw differential binding, meaning the antibodies for a particular protein, like keratin or hemoglobin, only bound to particular areas. This is Schweitzer. This demonstrates the specificity of these antibodies and is a strong evidence that different proteins persist in different tissues, even through the fossil record. This is crazy. You wouldn't expect to find keratin in liver, for example, but you would expect to find hemoglobin. And that's what we saw in the responses of these samples to different antibodies and other chemical tools that they applied to different parts of the fossil. So they could actually start to differentiate, and they differentiated through this technique the fact that these creatures were covered in blubber, which is one of those things that we see in warm-blooded and not creatures who are not able to thermally control themselves.
And this, as you're talking about this, though, I'm remembering some studies that we have discussed previously where it is questionable as to the cold-bloodedness of dinosaurs. Like researchers have been finding evidence over the last several years that really suggest that no, dinosaurs were not cold-blooded like lizards or snakes that have to hang out on rocks all the time to get warmer.
Right.
And this is evidence that the Ichthyosaur was definitely warm-blooded.
Yeah.
Thermoregulation is a hot topic right now on my mind. That's pun intended. I'm actually thinking about doing my video about it this week because as a person who've just come off of having a flu, my temperature went from 100 to 103 throughout the day multiple times. And I was just like, what is happening with my thermoregulation right now? And how is this working? And what is changing it all the time? But even just I've looked into this for other things in the past, and it's so fascinating to you just keep all that on board. So you'd think that, I don't know, that it makes sense that something as large as a dinosaur would be right. Warm-blooded when you really think about
their
it.
Own. Yeah.
Like you have to be able to cool off all of that muscle movement. Like I don't know.
Otherwise you're just like, you've got so much muscle mass, you're so big and dense, you're just going to burn up from the inside.
Right.
Figure out how to get rid of it. Or if you're little like me and you get cold hands and a cold head, you wear a hat in your basement while you're doing your podcast.
I was going to ask about that. It's very nice.
It's very cool.
Very warm. That's funny.
Oh my gosh. Is that it for that story, Justin? Did you have anything else to mention about it?
I could keep talking forever about any subject, but we could move on, certainly.
Well, fantastic. Anyone, if you just tuned in, this is This Week in Science with Dr. Kiki, Justin Jackson, and TWIS Dominguez. Anyway, don't forget to go to TWIS.org to get your 2019 TWIS calendar today. Gotta ensure it arrives before Christmas, right? We have them.
Well,
I have them. I can mail them. It's so exciting. All right, now it is time to ask TWIS questions. And I don't mean 3 questions. I mean, I'm going to ask TWIS, hey, I'd love to ask you, since we've got you here, about yourself.
I see what you did there with I'm not going to ask 3 questions. I like that. That's funny. TWIS questions. Yeah. That's good. I haven't heard that one before.
I'm sure you
No, come on.
I really haven't. I really haven't. Wow. Yeah. That's a new one.
Okay, well, enough of my terrible name joke. I'm
proud of you.
Because we had this just for the audience, we had this pre-show conversation about, is there any sort of usage of your name that hasn't played out? And we kind of figured out that it's all been covered. And the Yeah, Kiki. Well done.
Apparently not. Kiki, you found the little dark corner of my name joke.
There we go.
proud
What
of
are
it.
your hopes, aspirations in on about life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the future of the planet? What do you?
How did
doing?
you get started talking about science?
Well, I've always loved science and like always. When I was 11, I would go, I'm from Michigan, and I would travel on a short bus to the Science Saturdays program at the University of Michigan. I would like learn physics and like all, with actual college students and stuff. And I've always just been super into it. And I worked at a historic site for a long time, and I learned to like history as well from doing that. But I always tried to find like the sciencey angles. So when people would come in and they'd be like, oh, so what was the 1880s like? I'm like, well, they had Hershey bars, Heinz ketchup, and you could make a phone call across the United States if you wanted. And they were like, I wasn't meaning like that. I meant more from like a historical perspective. Give me names and dates, please. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I can try that. I can try doing that if you really want. I'm trying to be relatable. Okay. So I was getting my master's degree in communication from American University in DC. And I met this recruiter for the Discovery Channel, and she was like, who are you? And I said, I would like to work there, please. And she said, okay. And then I saw her again two or three times over the next week and kept giving her my resume until she said yes. So I got an internship there.
So the lesson for people is persistence pays off.
True. There was actually, funnily enough, the museum I worked at called Fort Mackinac, and one of the governors of Fort Michilimackinac, which was an older fort that was there, named Patrick Sinclair, had a quote, persistence wears down resistance.
You took it to heart, and
I did, yes. So I ended up making videos for what became D News, which many people on the internet who watch science videos know, which is now called Seeker, still exists. And I worked there for many years. And then recently I left on my own. Now I'm doing my own thing.
What is your
And
own?
now you're part of TWIS.
Now I'm doing
Sorry, Blair. We were talking on the side. We really like TWIS. I don't think we're giving them up. I hope you find whatever the vacation you took. I hope you find something to do.
Good luck, Blair. Bye.
Bye, Blair.
Wow. Rubbing it in.
My own thing is called Uno Dos of Trace.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wait. Okay. So you have been to the yes.
Of course.
Uno Dos of Trace is a show about science and education and learning, but I like to just keep it to the learning content because I'm trying to make stuff that I find curiosities out in the world, and I'll go and try and find interesting stuff about them. So things like the sounds that your modem made, if you were old enough to use a modem, what the modems were saying to each other, which was a super fun story to research.
Oh, so
really interesting.
That's okay. So I have always assumed that somebody somewhere decided, you know what? Let's make a sci-fi sound, and when the modem will make the sci-fi. It's completely meaningless, but we're just gonna make a sound so the human knows that we're working, because it's gonna take like 5 minutes or 10 minutes before we can connect. So let's create a fake. And I suspect, oh my gosh, the 3D printer we have at work makes the most amazing 1980s sci-fi sounds. It is just fantastic in the noises it makes. And I've got this cell counting machine that makes these sounds that I'm convinced there's no mechanism in there that requires these sounds to be made. So I'm always wondering, is there like some sort of sound theater taking place that is completely removed of function? So what was it with the modem? Is it actually a sound that means something, or is it just to entertain us while we're waiting?
I was totally with you on that. I thought that it was something like, oh, well, it's just covering up whatever's actually happening. It's like, when you hear those like videos where they say, oh, this is the sound of space. And I'm like, well, no, it's not. That's like 1 hertz. And then they
heavily processed.
They did all sorts of stuff. These
Yeah.
are actually the modems talking to each other. So they're using these frequencies that we have to use because that's how phone lines were designed. So they had to use hearable frequencies because the phone lines, that was where they would work the best. Mm-hmm. That's how the phone systems would work, because they would actually put handsets onto, like, the original modems were literal phone couplers, right? You'd take, like in people look at Ferris Bueller's and the War Games movies, you know, you just take the handset and put it onto something. So they had to use that phone system in the same way that our voices would. And they're essentially saying things like, hey, how fast a modem are you? Are you a modem at all? Like, what are you do you have echo cancellation? Because I got echo cancellation. If you want to cancel that echo, that'd be great. Like, so all sorts
I
of.
love this whole conversation going on.
Yeah.
But
so they're
okay,
just
but
talking
is it
back and forth at each other?
Is it fair to say, though, that there's still a little bit of theater involved in the fact that it was playing through our speakers when it could have not been?
No, I totally agree with that. I feel like
Okay.
I wondered, and I ended up, you know, I assumed this is no longer the case, that they don't have to make noise, right? Which is why we don't hear them anymore. They can do all of this digitally outside of our hearing range, right? But I guess my guess is that they let you hear it just in case something did go wrong, or like your mom picked up the phone, or you on the internet? I'm trying to call Cindy. You know,
You know how many times that happened?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Mom, my girlfriend from Canada and I are talking.
Oh, the olden days of the internet. Dial up.
So now I'm curious. What's the theater sound of high-speed gig connection? Like, why don't I get to hear it? Why am I being left out of the conversation?
Someone out there who makes those videos about the sounds of space should do that same kind of process and move like, I think somebody did for an art project. I looked it up for this. I'll try and find it and send it to you, but it had somebody made Wi-Fi into the, like, a hearable. He could hear Wi-Fi because of a prosthesis, I think. I'm remembering it, so I might be getting details wrong.
No,
he could hear like the Wi-Fi signals, and and he made a thing, and it sounded kind of like pips and pops. Like it wasn't like tones, but it was like kind of weird sounds, which is I love anything like the visualizations of how Wi-Fi is like flowing through your house, or you know how electronic wave things that we can't see, how we can make them visible. Some of my favorite things. So I'm definitely going to make those kind of videos once I get off the ground. But
right, and then how those invisible things that we can't see can make us visible. There are all those stories about Wi-Fi being used as a way to see through walls, almost like a radar.
Yeah.
Picking up signals, and if you can detect the shadows made by certain things within the frequency band of the span of the Wi-Fi, then somebody could potentially figure out where you are in your house versus
somebody could see through the garage door that there's a form centered in one side of the garage, or they could actually just tune into the show and see like full video and audio, like, you know, they're kind of going about it the hard way. But I get it.
What is your the favorite thing that about what you do?
I love learning new things just in general. It like drives me. Even just now when we were talking about one of the stories that Justin brought up with the scanning, I was looking up how they were doing the scanning for the Axe one, the Stone Tools one. They used a scanning system called infrared radiofluorescence. And so I was looking that up to try and understand what it is, only because a lot of these ancient tools, they would go carbon date them, right? But carbon dating's going away. So it's nice that they're coming up with new scanning. Like, you know, we're getting less chance, but
Max Planck Institute has been doing amazing things in this field. Yes.
Yeah. So I just as soon as it was brought up, I had this like need to go and find out what is that? I want to learn about that. And so just getting to do that and then tell other people about it. I can't believe I can't believe it's a career to say, hey, are you curious about like stuff? Just go find it out. Go find it out and tell people.
Yeah. And that is one of the biggest things that when I was in college, this was not a thing that you could go make into your career. And now it is an option. And it's pretty amazing. How many tabs do you usually have open on your window?
I mean, right now I'm doing a podcast and I got 10. I have an app just to manage all my tabs. I have a tab app just for that. So many tabs. Although I am a compulsive tab closer, I do close them a lot. I end up reopening them way more than I should. It's a problem. I'm like, oh, I don't need all these, and I'm like, oh crap, I need it.
I did need that. I needed to learn that thing.
Damn
I
it.
want to know.
Yeah.
I'm always I'm the fear of closing the tab person. I'm like, no, if I close it, then I can't go back to it.
Yeah.
I did that to an Excel sheet that apparently was the source of all the data that I had in all of the other Excel sheets. And so I closed this, I deleted it because I'm like, I don't need this. And then all of my data went to 0 everywhere else. It like flowed down. It was like,
Undo,
oh
undo,
no.
undo.
No, how do I undo this? Yeah, I totally dig what you just said. Like that's but isn't it? And I even though I did a disclaimer about the fact that there's much more interesting things in the world than humans, and we've talked about nothing but humans almost for most of the show. There is like I get to the point. I've done this so long that I get so bored with anything that is the same thing that I've seen or heard or is just redundant within our human society. And there needs to be, like, after a while, it's like a fix. It's like you become a junkie to learn the new edge of beyond the stuff that already got figured out. And it only seems to be interesting at some point if it hasn't been known before. And it's a and the fact that, like, you're doing this, there's so many unknowns or oft unasked or not asked enough questions out there. That there's so much territory to delve into. There's just like, it's like limitless.
Yeah. I mean, when we were working with DNews and Seeker, we ran into a problem after a while. We made about 3,600 videos in the span of 6 years.
Yeah.
We had various hosts and writers coming in all the time, and it was just a constant flow of new knowledge. And for years, it was so like exciting and new every time. And then after a while, we would all be like, oh, this is so cool. Oh, we did it. Oh, this is so cool. Oh, we did that one too. Oh, this is so cool. Man, we did that. You did that one. Oh, crap. No. So after a while, you do crave. It's like, okay, well, how can we take that and find a new way to look at it, which sometimes is really fun. So even though it's kind of like getting scooped, you just scooped yourself, a year ago or 2 years ago. Just trying to figure out how to make that story like fun and interesting again. And that's I don't know. It's less satisfying in my heart, obviously, because it's not new knowledge all the time, but it's just a different challenge to try and make those stories still interesting.
Yeah, because science really is that slow progression of the accumulation of information, yet we live in this information cycle age where it has to be fast and furious, but that's not really the way science is, except for every once in a while with these big jumps that you weren't expecting. Like,
and you're never but and they're big jumps, but they're also like, we get to skip around, right? We get to DJ this thing up or browse or what is the thing when you channel surf? We get to channel surf science. So it may be that we didn't actually talk about some sort of geological thing that might be a life form for 5 years, right? But we talked about 1,000 other things in between. And then next time there's like somebody like after 10 years under the ice digging tunnels to excavate what might be microbes under an ancient seabed, we finally have a little bit of new evidence. And we get to like roll with it like this just happened out of nowhere. Bam!
New science. Oh my God, we just discovered it. It wasn't at all a bunch of people's jobs for literally most of their lives.
No, we are getting to have these conversations with thousands of people putting a lot of effort into into the incremental steps that go in between, sometimes unnoticed.
Yeah, well put.
Yes. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you, Trace. We're so glad you are here tonight, and we're not done with you yet.
No,
Yay!
Second thing.
We have a whole second.
There's more
coming. That's right. So everyone, I would love you to stay tuned because we have more science ahead. Justin is going to be missing Greenland, and I've got no heart stem cells. Trace has a GPS system for somewhere. But we'll be back in just a few moments with more This Week in Science coming up. Stay tuned.
Can't explain things you've heard with more than intuition. The line of reason shows the way to go. New conclusion. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need. Put on a pair of goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't see.
All right, everybody. I am so glad that you are here with us this evening because the calendars are here in my hands. That's right. I have the 2019 Blair's Animal Corner TWIS calendars, and they are available for you. So you need to get to twis.org where you can order one of your calendars. And if you order them soon, I'll get them in the mail, hopefully soon. I'm going to spend a big old long day addressing and mailing calendars to people. And you'll get this beautiful artwork from Blair for you. Lots of science holidays and reminders about TWIS whenever there's a TWIS episode. So twis.org is where you can find that. Twis.org also has amazing resources for you. Other ways that you can help TWIS out are by going to twis.org, where you can find our Zazzle store. That's right. If you head over to twis.org, you can click on the Zazzle store link. The Zazzle store link will take you to our Zazzle store, where you can find all sorts of TWIS products with logos and pictures from previous Blair's Animal Corner catalogs so that you can get them in time for the holidays. It looks like there's a bunch of discounts going on there right now, but a portion of the proceeds does go to support TWIS. So you can support TWIS with your holiday shopping and get some fun TWIS-related gear for yourself or loved ones. Heading back to twis.org, other ways that you can help us out are by donating to TWIS. If you scroll down our page, there's a yellow donate button, which will take you to a PayPal interface where you'll be able to donate easily using PayPal one time. If you go to any recent episode, say for instance the last episode when we interviewed Dr. Alex Himmel from Fermilab about oh my goodness. My brain isn't working. Dark matter. Neutrinos. That's what we talked about. So much physics lately about neutrinos. If you scroll down to the bottom of that episode while you're listening to the interview about neutrinos, you can click on the pink buttons, which will allow you to donate through PayPal in a recurring basis. That's right. So you can click $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, set it, forget it, and support TWIS. Another way to support us through donations is our Patreon page. If you click on the Patreon link at twis.org, it'll take you to our Patreon community where you can then become a patron at a level of your own choosing. You can choose whichever level of support you would like to for a month. It's one charge per month. So say $10 a month, that's less than or around the price of one dark cup of coffee per week. That's about it for the number of shows that we do. And if you do that, we will thank you on the show. We absolutely will. There are many other levels of support. So head over to Patreon and see what works best for you so you can help us out, because we really could use your support. Now, back at twis.org on our homepage, one of the best ways to support us, if you have not done so before, is to subscribe. Or if you know somebody who would love TWIS, get them to subscribe. Click on that orange button. It will direct you to YouTube, iTunes, or Google Play, where you or someone else will be able to subscribe to the show and get TWIS delivered on a weekly basis. And that will really help us out by bringing more people into our community so that we can all enjoy science together. So I would really like to say, as I finish up this message here, happy holidays. Thank you for being a part of TWIS. We really could not do any of this without you.
Merry Twistmas, everybody.
And the show's still going.
And we are.
Can't explain things you've heard more than intuition.
And we're back with more This Week in Science.
Yes, we are. We are back, and now it is the time of the show that we like to call This Week in What Has Science Done for Me Lately? I don't know how I got that high.
Lately.
There we go. Thank you. I gotta go the other direction.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We can-
Was that
Might be-
nobody thought about
Come on,
Might be
everybody.
much more manageable if I take it down lower. Yeah.
This letter comes in from longtime listener Eric and AK in the chat room.
Oh, okay. I see him in the chat room
Right.
all the time.
He says, "Hi, everyone. What has science done for me lately? Well, on November 30th, 2018,
That
my
was a few
home,
days ago.
Anchorage, Alaska,
Oh,
yeah, was hit by a magnitude 7.0 earthquake. The
Huge.
epicenter was 7 miles from town. In other places, an earthquake that big and that close has been devastating and deadly. However, Alaska is earthquake country. We have a large percentage of the world's earthquakes, so we have some history. On March 27th, 1964, Anchorage and South Central Alaska suffered a mind-boggling magnitude 9.2 quake. This quake, known as the Good Friday earthquake for the day it happened, caused significant damage and a large loss of life. In 1964, after the arrival of relief workers and disaster supplies, came scientists. They studied the ground that had been moved by the quake. They looked at buildings. They talked with eyewitnesses. And in the end, they came away with a better understanding of earthquakes. The ground movement offered confirmation of the then new theory of plate tectonics. The damage assessments led to tough new building codes used throughout earthquake-prone regions, and the rescue and relief operations led to new and updated procedures to react to such a quake. So what has science done for me lately? Because of the scientific work done in the aftermath of the 1964 Good Friday earthquake, my home of Anchorage just rode through a potentially devastating 7.0 earthquake with some, but not a lot, of damage, no fatalities, and only a few injuries. Thank you, science. And on a personal note, the quake was a wild ride. Erick Knapp. Eric, thank you so much for writing in with your story. I heard about the Alaska quake, and I looking at the pictures, it looks devastating. Roads are torn in 25 pieces. I mean, there's just cracks that I can't even understand how they came to be. And it's amazing that there are no fatalities. Alaska is still undergoing lots of aftershocks. I guess to right now, there's something like 1,800 aftershocks that have happened.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. There's some,
But also there is the silver lining thing that you can now point to in any earthquake, is that it happened on land in the epicenter. If it was at sea, if it was still always at sea, then you get the tsunami thing, which creates
yeah. So they
Yikes.
didn't have to deal with the tsunami, which is fantastic, but it's, wonderful that science was able to lead to the protections that have allowed so many to be okay and ride it out. However wild it is.
hopefully Portland has also done this, because Portland is on that whole
No.
Portland has had some past ginormous earthquakes that were crazy.
Yeah.
But I won't.
We got volcanoes, we got earthquakes, we have all that stuff up here. And everybody, that earthquake preparedness kit. It's always good to be prepared with a bit of water and some food stashed away and some other supplies ready for those unexpected moments. Science can only go so far. But Eric, thank you so much for writing in. Really appreciate it. And I'm really glad you're okay. And if anybody else out there has awesome stories of how science has done something for them lately, please leave us a message on our Facebook page or send me an email, kirsten@thisweekinscience.com. All right, Justin, you got some science?
I've got some holiday greetings. 7 spiders spinning, 4 wiggly eels, 3 sneaky sharks, 2 water bears, a seahorse, and a liverwort plant.
Wow, that was well done. What are you talking about?
I tried. Okay, so this is researchers at our people, California Academy of Sciences. They have people who apparently added 229 new plant and animal species to understanding of life on planet Earth. These new species include 120 wasps, 34 sea slugs, 28 ant species, 19 fish, 7 flowering plants, 7 spiders spinning, the 4 wiggly eels, 3 sneaky sharks, 2 water bear, 1 frog, 1 snake, 1 seahorse, 1 moss, and of course 1 liverwort plant. The scientists made their finds over 5 continents, 3 oceans, venturing into river-carved canyons, diving to extreme ocean depths, scouring misty forests, crawling into creepy crevasses, sweating and squinting under blazing bright desert sun, and frantically forging ahead through freezing frozen tundras in search of unfamiliar life forms. Biodiversity scientists estimate that less than 10% of species on Earth have been discovered, says Dr. Shannon Bennett, Academy Chief of Science. Academy scientists tirelessly explore near and far. I assume that they actually get tired once in a while. I don't believe that they're completely tireless. It's not possible based on what we've just learned. From familiar forests to our backyards to remote locations as deep as 500 feet beneath the ocean surface, each species discovery may hold the key to groundbreaking innovations in science, technology, or society and help us better understand the diversity of life that makes up thriving ecosystems. These new discoveries also highlight the critical role we play as stewards of our one precious planet. I think is well said. Highlights include a swarm of spider-eating wasps. Yes, these are wasps.
We like spiders.
And Blair brought one of these. The spiders that they lay an egg on top of a spider, and then a wasp larva hatches and eats the spider.
Right.
Why did the spider allow that to be? Okay. There's a seahorse the size of a jelly bean that they discovered. Cute. New species blends perfectly into algae-covered reefs of southeast Japan, where it clings tightly via its tail to soft corals and feeds on passing plankton. Japa pigu, aka Japan pig, is the only seahorse in the world with a bony ridge running down its back.
Why did they name it Japan pig?
Okay, so according to Graham Short, who was a research associate, he says, we wanted to name it the flying pig, but no dice. And the reason they did is because it's got a pair of wing-like protrusions on its neck.
Yeah, that's weird looking, right? Cool.
Yeah, kind of a funky thing. Sea slugs. They found a bunch of sea slugs and a bunch that mimic algae and sometimes each other. They pretend to be different sea slugs for some reason. This is somebody we need to reach out to, by the way. This is Academy Curator of Invertebrate Zoology, Dr. Terry Gostliner. Gostliner has discovered 1,000 sea slugs and added another 34 in this round. So if we want like a TWIS something, a Dr. Kiki, whatever it is, like this is 1,000. Like this guy's finding sea slugs all over the place. If you want something named after a loved one, go pay this guy some money.
He also looks amazing.
Does he really?
I googled him, and he's got a picture of him like with a sea slug, and he's just like in a bag, and he's just like, yeah.
I'm an incredibly handsome man, and I collect sea slugs. What's not to love? They found some lost sharks. They found a dwarf false cat shark that swims some 3,000 feet beneath the ocean surface. I like the way they find. So this is also a caveat to discovering new species. This was found in Sri Lanka, on the east coast of Sri Lanka, where fishermen with some frequency catch this deep water shark, but it's not really tasty, so they always throw it back. And so there was some photograph of this shark. And so the researchers went there and they were like, hey, has anybody seen this? And they're like, oh, come back tomorrow. Well, and they came back to the next day, and there was one lying on the beach that they caught. And they're like, yeah, that's it. So sometimes discovering a species doesn't mean that it's the first time humans have encountered it, but it's the first time it's been cataloged in a scientific manner. There's a 3-foot coral snake that has a bright orange tail, which is apparently weird because all of its relatives have blue tails. So maybe orange is the new blue. There's a pair of water bears, aka tardigrades, that were discovered. Some eels, spiders. They found a spider that can turn around quicker than any other spider that's ever been able to turn around on its axis. Fast moving spiders. Fishes with different colors. Ants. 28 species of ants were found, all on the island of Madagascar. Most of these are carpenter ants, which can apparently infiltrate and exist anywhere on the planet. And this is sort of an interesting thing. Other than humans, ants are the creature that has been able to put down colonies on all of the major continents.
Ants are so successful.
Yeah.
I want to be
landmass.
I'm thinking I want to start a new question series called "What do you call success?" And my new definition of success is ants.
And also in Madagascar, I guess. Well, in Madagascar,
you
could also
Kiki, what are your definition of success? Ants.
There's also a lot of spiders that they discovered that pretend to look like ants in Madagascar, and they don't know if it's because ants are an annoying thing. Like if you go down and I'm going to eat ants, and then all the other ants swarm you and be like, no, you can't eat. Just one of us will all eat you back. If the spiders are pretending to be ants because it's easier to avoid getting preyed upon, or if it's because it's easier to snuggle up next to an ant and eat it. They don't really know yet. So they've got some more research that they get to.
Very chicken or egg question there.
More research.
No. It's always the egg. There were eggs before there were chickens. So it's always the egg. There were eggs and dinosaurs.
The first chicken that popped out of an egg was the first chicken.
Yeah.
But everybody was in an egg.
Eggs were a thing. Fish
doesn't mean that a chicken laid that egg.
It was just
a chicken's very close relative laid that egg.
Egg obviously came before chickens.
But which came first, ants or spiders?
I
have
don't know.
no
I'm
idea.
not
I have no idea.
Studier of
Ants or spiders that look like ants.
Somebody knows that, right off the tip. They'll just be like,
somebody else would be like,
but it's none of us here.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the big thing for this story, though, I mean, we are in the middle of a species loss period on our planet. Humans are the cause of massive extinction around our planet. Mm-hmm. It is, this little burst of joy and hope to see new species cataloged and to be able to increase the numbers of certain kinds of species. But it's always with that other side of the coin that we should look at it and say, the amazing world we live in how can we help preserve it?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough because as I kind of started off the show, the humans also led to the extinction of other humans. Like this is kind of a thing that we do and we're really good at. And it's like our one, like, what's your definition of success? Eliminating other species. Apparently, if you're a human, this is what we really excel at.
We're so good
Even
at
if there are
it,
other
it's so sad.
hominins. Yeah. But then again, you know, maybe.
It is what it is.
As a human, I'm very human centric.
You're
and I think
pro-human.
All right.
I'm
Well,
very pro-human. So I kind of at the end of the day go, well, if it's just humans.
so the next story I've
At least
got
it's not all spiders all the way down.
spiders all the way down. Potentially artificial intelligences supported by completely synthetic neural architecture. Researchers are constantly trying to figure out how can they build a brain like nature built it? How can they make a brain that acts like neurons that we find in the brain? How can they have those multiple connections, and instead of the way that computers work where computers can kind of process and then store, but they can't do both at the same time in the same circuits, neurons can. And so how can we make something that is really actually equal to the brain in so many ways? Do you guys know what a memristor is?
Oh, this sounds familiar. Is this something to do with
think so.
magnets and non-polar, polar, dipolar,
Nope.
tripolar?
Nope.
Is it the computer that you turn off, but it remembers everything because it's frozen in that state until you turn it on again? Wait, what is
Yes,
a memristor?
there we
That's
go.
it.
So,
Okay.
well, so it's not the computer that does it, but it is a component of electrical circuits that was hypothesized. I think it was back in the 70s. And then it was like a few years back that IBM researchers actually said, hey, we figured out that it is real and we can do this. And it's a component that, according to whatis.com, defines it as it limits or regulates the flow of electrical current in a circuit and remembers the amount of charge that has previously flowed through it. And so they're non-volatile. The idea being that you, instead of going through the whole power down, power up process on our computers, you could have instant on, instant off, because the memristor, if memristor components were used in the circuits of our circuit boards, they would remember exactly what their last state was before being turned off to go back to that again when turned on. And they've been suggested to be the thing that we need to be able to create what are going to be called neuromorphic synapses. Basically, these synapses that are just like regular synapses, but not. And so researchers have been trying to do this, but they've had problems with the memristors' voltage capacity and them burning out. And how do they get them to work all together? Well, these researchers in Europe, Germany, and in Italy, they have just published a paper in Nature Communications, in Nature Communications about their latest single memristor study. And in this single memristor study, they basically showed that they have the beginnings of what could potentially be a neuromorphic chip, a circuit that connects two electrodes that could allow current to flow between the electrodes instead of using calcium ions like are used in neurons. In this particular case, they would use silver and other components. So there would be other metals that would be used in the current flow. So these are little tiny nanowires that were created from zinc oxide, and they were produced from the Polytechnic University in Turin. They are approximately 1/10,000th of a millimeter in size.
Oh, that's huge. Huge.
Yeah, exactly.
So
It's 1,000 times smaller than a human hair. Which
that's small.
It's
it's huge. It's huge. Well, I mean, if you're looking from the perspective of tiny things, that's pretty big. But what's fascinating to me about this is that I think perhaps the first story I remember you bringing when I became a member of TWIS may have been Memristers. And it was at that point.
Years ago. Yeah.
Like we're at 698. It was like you'd actually have to go negative like 30 or 40 shows to get to the just pure radio broadcast version of the show when we were talking about this. But it was all about not having to wait for a computer to power up, and had nothing to do with now the fact that AI will be based off of this. So when we talk about these incremental steps, this is a brilliant example of something we talked about 14 years ago. Right. And now new update. Here's how AI is going to work. There's this thing. It's called the Memristor. We talked about it 14 years ago when it was just to make it so you didn't have to wait for the memory to load in your computer. But now, actually, it's going to power all of AI to create synthetic brain power. That's awesome.
Yay.
Yeah. Yay. Yeah, and their analysis of this Memristor system is it's only a single nanowire unit that they were looking at. They weren't looking at a connected network, and so that's what they're going to be leveling up to later, is trying to create networks of these single nanowire Memristors to see if they can get them to connect and act as neuron connections actually act. But from what they have seen of this nanowire model system, they've got what they've got is self-assembly. So they basically have to set up the system in the right way and put current in the right place, and the nanowires form, and the memristors form. They've got self-limited devices that can grow from the bottom up, and they're saying that they really think this is the solution. So we will see where it goes. And they say it's very inexpensive as well. So it's not something that would be expensive to produce, which is always exciting when we're talking about technology as far as who's going to be able to use it.
It's who's going to be able to use it. It will use it, because by the time we get into like the thing running for a few months, it will take over the planet, which is fantastic, because somebody really needs to take charge of this thing. Like, this has been an unmanned ship for a very long time. We have nobody at the wheel. It's about time some form of intelligence starts steering this.
I think the main thing, we just need to not teach it all the secrets of removing species from the planet, because like we're really good at that. We don't want to teach them how to do that. We got to stay at best at something.
My fear is that it's going to figure out, actually, I could preserve almost every species on the planet if I just eliminate one.
Sharks, right?
All right.
That's sharks. Let's just say it's sharks for now.
Can you help us find our way out of this murky mess, Trace?
So the GPS system is up next. Actually, not our GPS system, though. This is something that I think a lot of people don't know. There are multiple GPS systems. What we call GPS is the United States GPS system. It's managed by the Department of the Air Force, and it's a constellation of satellites that our phones and devices listen to signals from. We're not like communicating with them back and forth. We're just picking up the signals, right? So the Europeans wanted to launch their own GPS system. Without getting into too many of the reasons, mainly it was because they wanted everyone who used the GPS system to have access to the entire bandwidth available on GPS, all of the channels, as much resolution as is possible. Whereas the US, because it's a military-based system, doesn't always feel that way. They say,
wait a second. Okay. I'm going to ask for a slight clarification.
Military wants to keep some things to themselves.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, okay. So that system that allows a somewhat autonomous tractor to use every square inch of a field as it turns back and forth and does the rows is not the same system that's available for the farmer in France as it is the farmer in
GPS is global. Our GPS system is global. India has, this is from memory, but India, I believe, has their own GPS system that just works in India. You can buy a phone in India, get the Indian GPS system, and if you took it to China or Pakistan or England, it would not GPS.
So
Not
this
GPS.
is something I had no idea. I have always assumed that the GPS system is like, okay, this is a planetary thing. We have just enough satellites up there to triangulate your location. If it's pinging down to you, you can pick up the signal, and that's it. And there you go.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that there were multiples of this. That's crazy.
It's really cool, right? So this is the Galileo system. And the Galileo system's fairly new. The Europeans have been launching the satellites for a while. So each of the satellites in all GPS contain atomic clocks. The Galileos contain 4 atomic clocks specifically. So when they launched their satellites, they were launching Galileos 5 and 6 in 2014 on a Soyuz. Some crap went south. They did not end up getting to the orbit that they needed. The Soyuz failed to achieve the orbit, and the satellites were in dire straits. The Europeans were likely quite chuffed. Oh, no, what's the opposite of chuffed?
I don't know, but I was reaching for a Dire Straits reference, and I realized I don't have a single one. I have none. I know
they
nothing.
were worried. Oh, I got it. They were worried about spending money for nothing.
There you go. There you go.
Okay. I got there. The thing about GPS satellites is they have been used for a long time because they have these very precise clocks on them to determine time dilation and to study it. Because since we're all familiar, time dilation, it's if you're moving further away from a gravitational body and you're moving at a high rate of speed, your perception of time is going to change for the person or device that's closer to that massive object. So
and all of our GPS has to take this into account. Otherwise, they give you horrible directions. You end up showing up, or your map overlay is wrong. You pin a point and it ends up over here because the satellite was going that way at this speed in relation to the
so essentially it in the signal sent from every one of the satellites telling your phone the satellite's name and its current location and the exact precise time with this atomic clock that's on board. And your phone uses all of these different GPS satellites to say, okay, this is where I am specifically. So when the Galileo got screwed up, luckily the engineers at the ESA were able to stabilize their orbits, but they were not in the orbit that could make them useful for GPS satellites. They were really not sure what to do because they were in this highly elliptical orbit, which would cause them to fall and crest at a delta of about 8,500 kilometers. So they would go way up and then come all the way back down. They go way back up again, way back down.
Which, by the way, just for some of the audience that might not be familiar with kilometers, 8,500 kilometers, did you say? Is approximately 8,500,000 meters.
Nice.
Approximately the same.
And then they had on board, of course, the atomic clocks, and they also had other things like laser retroreflectors so they could determine precise distances and things like that. So these engineers figured out, hey, wait a minute. That means that their time dilation, because of their orbit, is going to be very predictable at different heights. So they're going to be really high, and so they'll get this interesting time dilation. Then they'll be low, and they'll get a different time dilation. So they started to study their signals at the peak and at the trough of their orbits, and then ended up, after 3 years of taking all this data, tested time dilation theory from Einstein's theory of relativity down to 4 picoseconds in one of the satellites, where they could predict, here's how fast time is going to be moving on that satellite, which I just think is so cool. Also
amazing.
Fun, end to the story a little bit is that the engineers did manage to use all of these gravitational movements that they were not gravitational, but like orbital movements, to incorporate the black sheeps of the Galileo family back into the network. So now they are actually giving GPS. They were able to use some orbital mechanics to get them up to where they needed to be. So they got to do this study, and they still get to have the GPS satellites for the world. So yay, Galileo.
That's a double whammy.
Right?
Right? Do science and use your results also to figure out how to fix it, and then go, hey, satellites, go where you need to go.
Yeah.
So now Galileo, apparently it's going to be working and everybody will be able to use it.
Yeah, you could actually, I think it's working now. I don't know. I think I read into this more because of this is sort of a mashup of two interests of mine in that I find any relativity story super interesting, but also working with D-News back in the day, we actually got to talk to the Air Force about the GPS system for a while and talk about all the different satellites they've launched. And it was so crazy because I didn't know that much about it. So when I went and looked up some of the problems they were having launching these new satellites. And one of them was the frequencies they're using are different. The Galileo uses a different frequency than the GPS system on purpose, so that if the US military wants to come in and black out a region, they can do it with their GPS system. But Galileo's like, yeah, but they can still Galileo if they want, because free for everyone, yo.
Nice.
Yo.
And the clicks for free.
That's right.
Finally go. Okay. Hey, off the charts. That's how Sarah Das, a glaciologist at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, describes the melting across Greenland's mile-thick ice sheet. From a historical perspective, this is Quotey voice, today's melt rates are off the charts. And this study provides the evidence to prove this, says Sarah Das. We found a 50% increase in total ice sheet melt water runoff versus the start of the industrial era, and a 30% increase just since the 20th century alone. And this is a different Quotey voice, but it's going to sound very much the same. Melting of the Greenland ice sheet has gone into overdrive. As a result, Greenland and melt is adding to sea level more than any time during the last 3.5 centuries. Centuries, by the way, typically represent 100-year periods of planetary existence, if not thousands of years, said Luke Trussell, a glaciologist at Rowan's University School and Earth and Environment and former postdoctoral school at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, lead author of the study. An increasing melt began around the same time as we started altering the atmosphere in the mid-1800s. Ice lost from Greenland is one of the key drivers of global sea rise. So you have icebergs, big chunks of ice. Things break off, chunks fall into the ocean from the edges of those glaciers. But that's only one of the components of water re-entering the ocean. More than half of the ice sheet water entering the ocean comes from runoff just from regular old melted ice and snow. The study suggests that if Greenland ice sheet melting continues at unprecedented, air Quotey things, unprecedented rates, which the researchers attribute to warmer summers, it could accelerate the already fast pace of sea level rise. Rather than increasing steadily as climate warms, Greenland will melt increasingly more and more for every degree of warming. The melting and sea level rise we observed already will be dwarfed by what we may expect in the future as climate continues to warm, says Trussell. Even very small change in temperature caused an exponential increase in melting in recent years. So the ice sheet's response to human-caused warming has been non-linear. Warming means more today than it has at any point in the past. So they were able to go back to the 17th century by doing ice cores and looking at, what was ice melts in the past versus what it is today. And it's kind of determined that we're on a runaway, exponential, awful, horrible thing. So this is that's the scientific story. It's going to it's bad now. It's only going to get worse. But
thanks, science.
Yeah. To be able to answer what might next happen to Greenland, we need to understand how Greenland has already responded to climate change. And what they say is what our ice cores show is that Greenland is now at a state where it's much more sensitive to further increases in temperature than it was even 50 years ago. And 50 years ago, it was really bad. and so my end point of this is while we humans who are far flung from Greenland are going to be impacted eventually and in mass by this melting, we tend to ignore the humans who were already there. The Inuit of Greenland, who happen to be among the most salt of the earth folks you could ever hope to meet. Their world, their livelihoods, their history, their future, their very ability to exist on planet Earth is in immediate danger.
Right.
As we watch them wash into the sea through no fault of their own, through no benefit they have taken from this planet, as we take no action to prevent it from happening, we will be bearing witness to a foreshadowing of our own eventual demise, which will follow if no action is taken, with a cruel certainty and an icy indifference to our complaining about it when it takes place. Like we talk about this on this show quite a bit about human ability to survive in inhospitable climates and do all these sort of things that humans have done to survive. One of the things that occurs to me is the reason that humans have gone everywhere on this planet has to do with getting away from other humans, which is part of the Inuit story of Greenland as well. Some people who are running away from other humans who helped populate that. But this is really the, if we could ask for a canary in the mine, if we could hope to have some sort of thing by which we can register and calibrate and take some sort of measurement of what's the affect of global warming, Greenland is it. And the evidence that we're getting, the information we're getting from Greenland is that it is accelerating and it's much worse than we had anticipated. So for anybody out there who still is undecided in any way about what the next issue that we're going to have to rally around, as if it was a world war, as if it was a global economic collapse. If anybody's curious and wants to get in on the ground floor of trying to find solutions for the next big problem that will face humanity, this is it.
Yep. And right now, this is a very timely message as there is an international meeting on climate currently ongoing in Copenhagen, and people are talking all about these issues. In fact, there's a wonderful young lady on who is, I think she's from Denmark. I might be wrong, but she's a young lady who just spoke at the meeting and said, to paraphrase, all the old people who aren't doing anything about it, just get out of the way. Do something either do something or get out of the way, because the next generation is coming to take care of it. Mm-hmm. So it might be too late, unfortunately, but I am so glad that there are young people who are excited about helping this world, because we need to do it. And I think you're right to say that Greenland is a canary. They're not the only canary. There are countries who are losing the islands that they live on due to sea level rise. Rapa Nui and others are examples of that. So you can look around the globe for these examples, but it's happening and it's going faster. It's exponential. I think a report just came out today also that compared to the 1.7% increase in carbon emissions globally, it's going to be doubled for 2019 is the estimate. And that whatever everybody says, the hand waving of how we're changing our global emission habits, it's not really happening. So you're not
Yeah.
doing it right. Yeah.
This is a real downer, but it's only a downer if
it's good news. I meant that as good news. Do people take it as a downer? I'm sorry.
No, I think it's a good kick in the pants to be like, gotta do something about it. Also, it's only a downer if you think, man, gonna have to do some stuff now. And you could think of it like, wow, we get to try all of these new technologies. We get to build a whole new economy. We get to change like these things in a positive way. Not only are they going to make the world a better place, but you know what? I really love that coal plant that we built in 1950. Let's build some power plants in 2012 and 2020. Like, let's build some new ones then too. It's like let's keep it going. Let's build new stuff and try and find different ways to store energy and to build energy.
And I didn't bring this story, but the global warming seems to be reducing wind output globally, which means solar plants are being able to produce about 30% less energy than they used to, because somehow global warming is affecting the amount of wind that is being produced on this planet.
Wait, okay, solar panels? No, wind turbines.
Yeah, I think you mean wind turbines, but yeah.
I meant wind turbines, but I got
what
you
did
meant.
I say?
You said solar.
I said solar. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, wind turbines. I'm sorry. Wind turbines are down 30%. Yeah, it'd be weird if the wind affected the solar. It
blows the sun out of the way. That's how
but there is like this, like I like read one report was like India has seen about 30% reduction, and then I read this other study that was like in the Midwest there's been this interesting decline, and it turns out like all of these different observations were connected, and somehow global warming is reducing the amount of wind energy that is getting transferred into the turbine portion. So like,
fascinating.
That's really done.
We'll make up for it. It's all right. We can do this.
Eater?
Yes, we can. But
Eater?
you know, and Eater's coming along. There was just a report of them testing some stuff at Eater, and it looked very positive. So that big money boondoggle is coming along nicely. There's some other plasma machines that we've talked about, also the Stellarator and others that are looking pretty exciting. Yeah. But you know, something that is not related to energy, related to energy production, but on a physiological scale, is the human heart. Right? We've got a heart that pumps to pump the blood to keep us going, to move the oxygen through our veins.
And our brains.
Moving. And our brains, yes, to keep us moving and grooving and doing all our stuff. Well, when you have a heart attack, a myocardial infarction, cells die in your heart. They are starved of oxygen for a moment. There's damage in the heart. And in the repair process, scar tissue is formed. Fibroblasts in the heart tissue replace the heart muscle that was there before. And so now, instead of having this area of pumping active cells, you lose that and you've got just this scar tissue that's there. And so your heart can't pump as well after a heart attack as it did before. So people have been super excited about the idea of cardiac stem cells, the idea that we've got stem cells all over our bodies. We've got stem cells in our skin. We got stem cells in our bones. We've got to have them in our heart. And that has been the working hypothesis for a really long time. But it's been controversial because some researchers have found evidence of cardiac stem cells, but then they haven't been replicated. People haven't been able to do the work over again, which pretty much means it probably isn't true. And so there have been a few reports out recently pushing more and more in the not true direction. And so a group of researchers from Hubrecht Institute in Utrecht, the Amsterdam University Medical Center, École Normale Supérieure in Lyon, and the Francis Crick Institute in London, led by Hans Clevers, they tried to basically create a cell-by-cell map of the dividing cells in a heart after heart attack. They took mice, they gave them myocardial infarctions, and then they looked to see what was dividing. because the definition of a stem cell at this point in time is the ability of a cell to replace lost tissue by cell division. And so they went looking for those dividing cells to see what they were. And they went to see what they turned into. And all they found were blood vessels and immune cells and those fibroblasts that had turned into the scar tissue. No new heart muscle. So this study is one among many that is establishing that there may not be a cardiac stem cell. And the study is in mouse hearts, the murine heart, as opposed to the human heart. So maybe we're special. Maybe we have the cardiac stem cells, but it's pretty likely that if some of our closest relatives don't have these cardiac stem cells, that we probably don't have them either. So this study additionally gets rid of what those false leads were, where when stem cell researchers said they saw dividing cells and they must be cardiac stem cells, they were really looking at these precursors to new blood vessels and immune cells, which would be very important to recovering the health of that area of the heart, whereas the muscle itself would not necessarily be the important part of recovering the health to the heart. And in fact, they determined that in those cells where in the hearts of the mice where the fibroblasts were allowed to turn into scar tissue, that actually that scar tissue, as much as we don't like it, is necessary, because without that scar tissue, the hearts were not really able to function. When it's blocked, the mice had acute cardiac rupture. Their hearts exploded.
Yikes.
Yeah. So that scar formation is very important, even though it does diminish our heart's ability to beat and pump that blood. But right now, we may not be looking at heart stem cells that can be brought into action in the heart after cardiac arrest. Maybe we're going to be looking at other regenerative therapies like heart patches, where they bring in cells from other areas, where they try and patch that damaged area and get the cells on either side of the scar tissue to communicate with each other, to allow that conduction that occurs between heart cells in the heart.
I think those carry heavy ethical issues with him. Much better just to genetically edit somebody not to have a heart condition. In the
Back
first
to
place.
where we started. That's right.
and to go through all of these really ethically troubling type of procedures in order to preserve human life longer.
That's right. We're back to where we started. Back to the gene editing. But yeah,
I'm not going to say anything this time. I'm going to take a different. I'm going to just.
Not, but by not saying something, you just totally like laid down a declarative statement that said, I solidly and affirmatively have staked out some ground, which I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I definitely later can revert back to this point and say, yes, remember when I didn't say this is what it was.
That's right.
Very well done.
I got two really quick stories for the end of the show. Really fast. We've got OSIRIS-REx at Bennu. And no, I'm not speaking a foreign language. This is exciting. NASA's OSIRIS-REx mission arrived at the asteroid called Bennu this week and is preparing, I'm going to use a technical term, boop, the chunk of space gravel to grab a piece of it and bring it back to Earth. Right now, it's actually testing the surface with lasers, trying to actually map the surface of the asteroid so they can find a good spot for the boopage.
That sounds, it sounds funny.
This is. I'm convinced, like everything audio is just performative for my entertainment and has nothing to do with reality. But this is also like, this is one of those things about. But we have learned in encountering asteroids is that there are these big gravelly things. It's not like a giant chunk of rock. It's a giant chunk of pebbles.
Yeah.
That are congealed.
And Bennu it looks like a pretty big chunk of pebbles. It looks like it has a very gravelly surface. We will see a little bit more to find out more about the history of our part of the solar system, because this guy isn't even really that far away from us. I mean, it is, but it isn't. We picked a relatively close target for our asteroid visitation this time around. Moving on to the other quick story of the evening. LIGO Virgo, our favorite gravitational wave observatories. These teams have released a full catalog of observations which contain 4 additional black hole mergers based on a deeper analysis of their data. So they have increased the number of observations that are available to us, and they've found some even bigger observations than what they observed before, that they had missed it previously. And so it's more black holes. Yeah, and one of them is even a more specific triangulation, because it's LIGO Virgo, which puts a collaboration which puts 3 detectors detecting something at the same time. It's even a more specific triangulation in space as to the location of one of these big black hole mergers, which is quite exciting. And then finally on this, we should have
somebody. We should have somebody from LIGO onto the show.
We have
at some point.
Did we just do that?
Like the week before, the thing that we could ask them the question about this thing, which is why we need to have them back.
That's right. Well, their next observation season begins in spring 2019. So I think that means there's going to be a lot more stuff to ask them about coming into summer and fall of next year. And on this note, final note, the LHC is closing for 2 years for maintenance and improvements. This is something that I'm never excited about when the LHC closes, but it's better for science because it's going to let them do better science.
Yeah. Better for science because better science.
That's right. Exactly. It's a motto for us all. All right. Have we done it?
We have.
Yay, we've done it. We've made it to the end of another show, and I would like to remind everyone that they can head to TWIS.org to find information about our 2019 Blair's Animal Corner TWIS catalog with all specially made art by Blair. It's animals. You like animals and
you
science.
can remember when she was part of the show through this calendar.
Through these calendars. All right, I would love to give shout outs for the end of the show. Trace, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. Thanks was fun.
For inviting me. This was super fun.
Yay, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope you can come back again sometime. But in the meantime, where can people find you?
I am at Trace Dominguez on all the social medias that matter. So Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, I guess. And also on YouTube, you can find me, youtube.com/Trace Dominguez, where Uno Dos of Trace publishes every week. Although this week with the flu, I'm going to have to maybe publish a truncated video, but I'm still going to get out there and try and learn something that I can share in the next few days. So,
you're an inspiration. You are fantastic.
Thanks.
I really appreciate what you do.
Thanks.
Thank you. And to others who help us every week, Fada, thank you so much for helping us with our social media and our show descriptions. Couldn't do this without you. Identity 4, thank you for helping to record the show. Gord McLeod, thank you for monitoring our chat room. It's nice to have nice chat rooms. It's good to have people on the scene. Everyone who is live in the chat room, our twis.org/live chat room and our YouTube chat room, thank you for joining us and being part of the conversation. And it's time now for me to thank our Patreon sponsors, which of course I didn't put up. So I'm going to sit here for 1 second while web pages load because I didn't put it up.
Internet speeds. Bring the modems out. Okay, I got it. Okay. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you to Paul Disney, Richard Onimus, Ed Dyer, Philip Shane, Ken Hayes, Harrison Prather, Charlene Henry, Joshua Fury, Steve DeBell, Alex Wilson, Tony Steele, Craig Landon, John Ratnaswamy, Mark Mazzaros, Jack, Matthew Litwin, Jason Roberts, Bill K, Bob Calder, Time Jumper 319, Eric Knapp, Richard Brian Condren, Dave Neighbor, Aiden Jeff, Paul Ronovich, Corrine Benton, Sue Doster, Dave Wilkinson, Ben Bignell, Richard Porter, Jacqueline Boyster, Noodles, Kevin Reardon, Christoph Zucknarek, Ashish Pants, Ulysses Adkins, Sarah Chavez, Artyom, Rick Ramos, Paul, John McKee, Jason Olds, Brian Carrington, Christopher Dreyer, Lisa Suzuki, Jim Drapeau, Greg Riley, Sean Lamb, Ben Rothrig, Steve Lesseman, Kurt Larson, Rudy Garcia, Marjorie Gary S., Robert, Greg Briggs, Brendan Minish, Christopher Rappin Flying Out, Aaron Luthen, Matt Sutter, Mark Hessenflow, Kevin Parachan, Byron Lee, and EO. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. And if any of you are interested in supporting us on Patreon, you can find information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience, or just click the Patreon link at twis.org. And remember, you can always help us out simply by telling your friends about TWIS. On next week's show, we will be back again, broadcasting live online at 8 p.m. Pacific time on twis.org/live, when it's going to be Justin and Blair's birthday episode.
I can't believe it. Hey, it's my birthday too.
It is. It's birthday season. We've got the double birthdays next week. So we're going to be singing happy birthday, Twissy birthday. And if anyone has any birthday messages for Justin and Blair, please send them to them or send them to me and I can read them to them on the show. It would be fun. And I don't know, maybe they might like it. So get in on the birthday action next week on the show. You can join our chat room as well if you watch live, but don't worry if you can't make it. You can find our past episodes on our YouTube channel and also at twis.org, where you can find all that lovely information.
Thank you for enjoying the show. TWIS is also available as a podcast. Just Google This Week in Science anywhere in your iTunes directory, or if you have one of the mobile type devices, which has come out recently, you can look for TWIS, the number 4 Droid app in the Android marketplace, or simply This Week in Science in anything Apple Marketplacey.
And I just put Trace's name in the rundown.
4!
Yay! I'm in there too.
Yay!
What am I supposed to say?
You're supposed to say 4!
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes are going to be available on the website, www.twis.org. You can also make comments and start conversations with the hosts and other listeners.
Or you can contact the hosts directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twisminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twis.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, somewhere in the subject line. Otherwise, your email is very likely to be spam filtered into oblivion. You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, which only has one S in the middle in case you get confused, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes due in the night, please let us know.
We will be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
Yes, yes, yes. But if you have learned anything from the show, please remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. This week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just get understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma. Got the eye. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. I've got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. So how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you learned anything from the words that we said, then please just remember it's all in your head. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. This Week in 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 Science.
I really love the gong at the end of that. Like that's like it's like my favorite part. Like I wish I had a button that I could hit that would make that gong sound occasionally through the show. Like
you could just buy a gong.
Somebody just said something like of epic importance, and they just said it really casually, but I'm going to make a big bong sound behind it, so everybody realizes that was an important thing that just happened.
We made it through another episode. We did it. There was so much science.
I love how you always say that as if there was some question that we would not eventually stop talking.
With you, Justin?
Okay, fair. But I do recognize that there is something that wasn't part of the show when we began.
Trace?
No.
Yeah, I mean, I was here when we began today.
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
Which? Yes.
There's a thing that you learn only after being a mother for a while. You have the ability now to shoot a look, which you didn't before. I think you threw the look before, but it wasn't, the grammar of the look hadn't been formed yet. But you now have the ability to throw a look that says simply consequences. and I think early on in the producing of the show, you would throw a look and I'd be like, what does that look mean? Not really sure what that look means. Does that mean keep talking or stop talking? I'm going to keep talking just in case it's keep talking, because I wouldn't want to stop talking if it meant keep talking. But now that the look has narrowed its laser focus to the point of meaning consequences. And I really believe like this is a look that can only be thrown once you have been a mother for some period of time.
It might be.
I feel like I've seen this look from Kiki.
Yeah, every once in a while.
It's a scary look. It's intimidating.
Well,
I've ever thrown you that look, Trace.
When we were way back when we were in studio together, there would occasionally be a shin kick.
Right. That's Pam's bringing that up. Pam's bringing it up in the chat room. Dr. Kiki just used to kick Jackson Fly in the shins.
Yeah, because it wasn't like I couldn't see it in the eyes yet. There wasn't this telegraphed communication that hadn't been articulated yet. But now I've noticed over the last, I don't know, maybe like year and a half or so, like you can throw a look that's just like, oh, there's consequences. Don't know what they are. Have no idea. But I know that I don't want consequences because those are the things you want to try to avoid.
That's how operant conditioning works, right? You make somebody, get them to just do a behavior. You don't even have to give them a reward or a punishment. They just do it.
Yeah.
So you paired that look with a kick to the shin, and now he's just like, I fear the look.
I fear the look.
Finally getting to that level of communication where we don't need shin kicks or speech at all. I can just see it in the eyes.
Just an icy stare.
I can see that icy stare. And I can know, I should have stopped earlier with my words talking.
But I have so much kindness in my eyes.
I need to go back over this episode, though, and just find the point where I was like, because there's a lack of wind, solar panels aren't working. Like, this is...
We knew what you meant. We knew what you meant. But I was in my head being like, did he actually mean solar panels? And if so, how would that work? The heating cooling thing? Is there dust? We're worrying about dust? What do we got? A lot of dust. I think even Mars, they'd be like, there's not that much dust.
But I get how in there is a part of my brain which is like wind and solar are linked as a dynamic duo against other forms of energy. But yeah, that was fantastic because in real time, I was like, did I say that? Like, I don't know. Are they both wrong? Probably not. Okay, so I did say the wrong thing. Yeah. But anyway, thank you, chat room, for always being there chatting alongside us.
It was nice.
I
like a good bunch of people.
Peeking into the chat room and seeing what they're talking about. Sometimes they're like so into what we're talking about and they're having a separate conversation about it. And I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? And other times they're like talking about something entirely different, like something else they're thinking about. And I'm like, what do you guys, do I want to be on that conversation? Distracting, but awesome.
Yeah, I think eventually when the day comes, which it comes for all of us, when I retire from this show, I think we're gonna go hang out in the chat room. That's a good crowd.
Seems like the place to be.
That's a good bunch of folks.
I mean, you could
Kiki asked me to be on the show. She'll be like, "Can I be on the show?" I'll be like, "I don't know."
I'm good here.
Just hang in the chat.
I feel like I like the older I get, the more these cycles around the sun that take place, the more I'm like, I'm really doing more than I really need to or want to. I could step way back from being on planet Earth. Like, I don't need to be this involved in even my own life. Like, I could take a break from my own life for like a long time. Be like, the decisions I've made, it's not like they were like instrumental or part. Like, you know what my life reminds me of? My life reminds me of Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Whoa.
In that,
how?
It's melty. I'm gonna go melty.
No, in that, regardless of all the suffering that Indy went through, and the beatings he took, and the fights he went through, and all of the things that went on in that movie, if Indiana Jones's character wasn't in that movie, the Nazis still get the Ark, and they still take it to the place where they like open up the Ark, and they still all die. And so, like, really, all of what Indy did in that movie is absolutely meaningless to how it ends. like if he didn't do any of it, the end is still the same. There's nothing that changes. And it's like one of the greatest adventure movies of all time, and yet the adventurer didn't have to be part of it. And the movie still
Nay,
ends.
Justin.
Nay.
Light was the adventure.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes.
Great.
It is. But Indy was like hurt everywhere.
Yeah,
at the
getting
end of that
punched
movie.
is less, you know.
He could have been drinking beers in a brothel and a country of ill repute, and the movie still would have ended the same. He could have had nothing to do with it. And so this is how I view my life. My life was very much Raiders of the Lost Ark. I had to encounter snakes, which I'm not a fan of.
Did a guy named Jacques bring them? Or was it just like in general? I feel like I've always wanted to know a guy named Jacques who works with snakes. Always, like my whole life. If it ever happens, I will let you know. But I don't actually hate snakes, but I'll still say the line.
Somebody's going to reach out to you. It's like, hey, I'm actually I don't have that much familiarity with snakes, but my name is Jacques, and
you just need somebody to facilitate.
I can do a little work.
I'm happy to show up so you can tell me you hate snakes and fulfill your lifelong dream. That's, you know what, that if that Jacques is out there, call me.
Oh, now you've invited adventure into your life.
Are we in the after show? Are we now? Is this officially the after show?
I didn't actually say it, but yes, we are in the after show.
Okay. So what was the quote?
Last terribly long because I've been fighting a cold, and
okay, that's fine. I just have to follow up on one thing that I've been that's been egging at me this whole time. The previous governor who had a quote about something about persistence overcoming something.
Yeah. Persistence wears down resistance.
Okay. So that is also, by the way, like the worst possible consent protocol. We're also telegraphing.
No, it's terrible.
This is like, if somebody's like, no, I'm not into that, you should never bring it up again ever in the history of knowing this person. Wearing down somebody's resistance to a thing that you are interested in, but they aren't, is an anti-consent sort of a scenario. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because from hearing that throughout the entire show, it's been in the back of my head going, it's like, that's not really a good strategy to feed to the young people.
You know, that's the best part about that. So it's this guy named, he was I can't remember if he was a Lieutenant Hampton or Lieutenant Colonel. Anyway, Patrick Sinclair is his name. And he had a bar on Mackinac Island where this was, called Patrick Sinclair's Irish Pub. And all of the young, like, attractive female servers and bartenders had to wear a shirt that said persistence wears down resistance.
No.
They all hated it.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And but the best part was it was an Irish pub and Patrick Sinclair is Scottish. So it was just like all sorts of great.
It's like,
all sorts of great.
Well, you know, if it's not Scottish, it's crap.
I just saw consequence eyes.
You did. I saw it too.
I'll be quiet for the rest of the life.
No, I'm starting to turn into a pumpkin,
Okay.
guys.
Yeah. Trace, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
This
We'll
fun.
see you next week. I also, as your first role as a new member of TWIS, you have to be the one who explains to Blair that she's no longer part of the show.
Okay, just give me your number. I'll give her a call. And
No. We wouldn't do that to you. We wouldn't make it like a personal thing where your voice is involved.
Oh, got it.
We just want to expect you to post it somewhere on the internet that she might find.
Got it. Okay. Should I tweet it?
Oh,
Good night.
they'll be like,
Yeah, but this
she'll text me, be like, what's going on?
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Thank you for joining us.
And I learned a lot, which is nice.
Yay!
like
I did
that.
too. Thanks for great conversation and bringing your wonderful perspective to the
Yes.
show.
Thanks. I'll come back anytime. You let me know.
Yay! Awesome. We'll have to do it again for sure. Everyone out there, calendars. And we're almost at the end of the year. So top 11 science, hashtag top 11 science. Or, you can send me what you think are your top stories for 2018. We're coming down to that pretty soon. Yeah, but that's about it. Justin, thank you.
Of course.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Introductions. It's good to have introductions. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Have a science-filled week, and we will see you yet again. When? Next Wednesday. We'll be back. We'll be back next Wednesday. Thanks for watching.